This is Reverse Reset Restore, a place to share experiences, ideas, concepts, and strategies that can help us in our personal journeys of healing. My name is Sally, and I've been working on reversing my physical health conditions, resetting my mind, thoughts, and beliefs, and restoring my relationship with myself. You can too. Change comes from within. Just a gentle reminder to practice kindness to yourself should today's episode bring up any thoughts or feelings you may struggle with. It's okay to take a break or even skip this episode if you need to. Sometimes when we are doing internal or external work to reshape our lives, behaviours and choices, we just need to give ourselves permission to rest. If anything comes up in this episode or any of the episodes, I encourage you to find a trusted therapist to work alongside you. Hi and welcome to Reverse Reset Restore. This is part 1 of a 2-part episode on self-sabotage. Yes, those sneaky little insidious, vermicious canids of our own doing. Yeah, I just dropped vermicious canids. 10 points if you know who I'm talking about, but I'll let you know anyway. It's from Roald Dahl's Willy Wonka series. It's actually the second book where he goes off in the glass elevator and meets vermicious canids. But he does reference it in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as well. Anyway, vermicious canids are creatures so vile, so violent, so tenacious to the point where it's almost idiotic. They're creatures that will almost without fail always fight to the death. Now, if that doesn't sound like some of our self-sabotaging thoughts and behaviours, I don't know what does. We'll come back to vermicious canids in another special episode dedicated to them as the thought aliens we like to keep in residence. But in this episode, I want to talk about the silence we impose when we self-sabotage. We'll look at what self-sabotage is, how to spot the signs, and why we might do it. And then in part 2, we will look at, most importantly, ways we can stop. So what is self-sabotage and why do we do it? In clinical terms, it's known as behavioural dysregulation, and it can be conscious or unconscious depending on your level of awareness. It's a behaviour that often comes out of a sense of being unworthy or feeling rejected or not feeling like you'll ever be enough. It can stem from anger that we've internalized or from shame that we carry around or anxiety about our place in life. Basically, it's habits and behaviours that have aligned with our false beliefs about ourselves. Self-sabotage is a habit that we often confuse for something we are, rather than something we do. The good news is that habits can be broken and new healthy behaviours can be implemented. Sometimes our self-sabotaging practices becomes a place of safety, of comfort, of knowing. We know how to hurt ourselves, and we've trained ourselves to lean into choosing destructive patterns and behaviours so that they become second nature. For some of us, this cycle of self-sabotage is so ingrained in how we view ourselves and our place in the world, it seems impossible to consider where we might begin and where the self-sabotage might end. And so we choose the security of what we know, even if we know it's going to keep hurting us. It's the better the devil you know than the one you don't type of thinking. Better to stay in the cycle of suffering rather than risk failing, or worse still, succeeding. Because, succeeding is an unknown variable. It brings with it possible attention we're not ready to deal with. It brings having to walk through our shame and insecurities. Weirdly enough, self-sabotage helps to keep us safe, or so we try to believe. but it's an exploitive train of thought because it keeps you stuck, small, and a victim of circumstance. And in its most extreme form, it keeps us from making choices to love ourselves into something more. We've all been guilty of doing this at some point in our lives, silencing who we truly are and ought to be. When I talk about the silence of self-sabotage, I mean that while we may be acutely aware of the choices we're making that contribute to our self-destruction, we choose to ignore our behaviours, our thoughts, our actions. When we do this, we are silencing the pain that is behind the self-sabotage to begin with. Even when we might acknowledge it, we do it in a flippant way. Oh, I'm eating my feelings, or I know I should go to the gym, but I've had a hard day, or I'm drowning my sorrows. We can also learn to silence those around us by refusing to let them hold us to account. I've done this. I've asked my partner to hold me to a fasting practice or my keto lifestyle or my fitness goals, and then I've fumbled. And God forbid he speaks up. Oh no, the self-sabotaging monster can be ugly. It doesn't want you to see it in all its dire glory. It wants you to ignore it. Pretend it's not even there. Just a ghost or a shadow. Nothing to rise against. Meanwhile, my pants are getting tighter, my blood sugars are going higher, and my self-esteem is an all-time low. And yet I have been compelled to silence that which I know to be true. I'm hurting myself. And ironically, I further protect my self-sabotaging by self-sabotaging. I ignore the work that I know would help me out of it. Do you know when you are in self-sabotaging mode? I do. I eat like garbage and I tell myself, I don't care. That's a lie. I stop journaling and spending time meditating. I stop testing my blood sugars. I get much more irritable and emotional. My pain levels increase because I'm feeding my body food that makes it inflamed. I keep lying to myself, pretending everything is okay, while all of my self-care routines fall apart. Then, the inevitable shame, guilt, anger, and disgust join the party, and it is a spiral onto the self-sabotage carousel. Maybe some of this is familiar to you too. Maybe you do know your self-sabotaging triggers and habits, or at least know that you are ignoring them. Whether you think you know them or you're completely clueless, we're going to look at why and how we do it. So why do we self-sabotage? There are probably as many reasons for this as there are grains of sand on a beach. But here are a few that come to mind. I just want you to think about it for a moment. If any of them sort of raise alarm bells for you, that could be a sign that this is a habit or a technique that you use in your own life. Fear of failure, fear of success, unworthiness, punishment, distorted beliefs, harsh inner critic, toxic perfectionism, fear of rejection, a drive to prove our worth, our inherent negativity bias, trauma, fear of getting hurt, low self-esteem, habitual procrastination, judgment. Any of these feel familiar yet? Yeah, me too. So what is the way out of this? How do we stop the silence of our self-sabotage when we are the very ones policing it and enforcing it? Well, now that we've looked at some of the whys we self-sabotage, let's take a deeper look at some of the signs you're engaging in self-sabotaging behavior. These are just 16 ways to self-sabotage, although again, I'm sure if we looked long enough, we'd come up with many, many more. Some of these signs are also very much a why in our self-sabotaging behavior. Again, I'd ask you to consider if any of these might be applicable to you. And obviously, signs of self-sabotage can vary from person to person, but these are the common indicators. Number 1, fear of failure or success. A deep-rooted fear of failing or succeeding, which can lead to subconsciously sabotaging opportunities or achievements. Number 2, lack of boundaries. Struggling to establish and maintain healthy boundaries, leading to overcommitting, people-pleasing, or being unable to prioritize one's own needs. I think women in particular are masters in lack of boundaries. We generally do more around our homes, with our families, and we take on a lot of the responsibility for all the various things that need to happen in our lives. Often this is placing ourselves and our needs at the bottom of a very extensive and exhausting list. How many of you take time for self-care, setting aside regular time to rest and recharge and do something solely for your own pleasure and happiness? When we live our lives without boundaries, placing everyone else above ourselves, we are self-sabotaging. Just like how the airplane safety instructions tell us we need to place our mask on our own faces before helping others, we can apply that same logic to our lives. We can't help others and be at our best if we are not putting on our own oxygen mask first. Number 3, self-sabotaging relationships. Choosing partners or friends who are emotionally unavailable, abusive, or incompatible, leading to constant turmoil or dissatisfaction. I used to joke that I collected broken people and that I was going to go after the full set. I drew a lot of people in who were emotionally dysfunctional and relied on me to give. Not only was that exhausting because I was constantly giving out my love and my energy, but I had engaged in relationships where there was no reciprocal giving back to me, no investment in me. It was all take. And I drew a sense of self-worth based on being needed. The problem was, once these people were feeling stronger and healthier in their mindsets and beliefs, I was quickly thrown to the wayside. This is something I'll talk about more in a separate episode because I figure I'm probably not the only one that this has happened to. Number 4, all or nothing thinking. Engaging in black and white thinking, where success is only seen as perfection or failure, leaving little room for learning from mistakes or celebrating small victories. This is driven by judgmental thinking, which is ultimately fear of not being enough. Number 5, avoiding opportunities. Turning down opportunities for growth, advancement, or positive experiences due to fear, self-doubt, or a lack of belief in one's abilities. Sometimes we use other people to be the reason for avoiding opportunities. But again, this self-sabotaging technique lies in fear of the unknown, fear of the idea of failing or succeeding. Number 6, repeating negative patterns. Finding oneself repeatedly facing similar challenges or situations that result in negative outcomes without taking proactive steps to change or improve those patterns. This is a matter of self-worth and fear of change. Sometimes we blame others for the similar patterns we find ourselves in because it's too painful to look internally. Number 7, not showing up in your life. You are actively or passively withdrawn, disengaged, or isolated from the people, places, and things you used to do in your life. I think the pandemic has really escalated this in a lot of people's lives. What we had to stop doing because of COVID has now become almost an absolute of remaining separate from life. COVID gave us a reason, an excuse to check out. But as the world returns to some type of normalcy, many people are remaining trapped in these behaviours. I'm talking about being apathetic to going anywhere or doing anything under the guise of pretending that these new habits have actually empowered you. Now, if you are feeling empowered by staying at home and not going back to the hustle you may have formerly led, that is great. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking to those who have given themselves permission to no longer show up in their lives and then complain or feel isolated by it. That, my friend, is a form of self-sabotage. Number 8, comparing yourself to others. We all know the saying, comparison is the thief of joy. And it's true. Comparison also allows room for you to judge yourself and other people. It creates space for envy to enter the chat room of your thinking. When we compare, we can give ourselves permission to not bother trying. And that is a self-sabotaging technique. Number 9, creating roadblocks that will stop you from achieving your goals. For example, you want to get fitter, so you immediately try to do a 10-kilometer run in the first week of exercising and you hurt yourself. Now you can't exercise at all because of your injury. That's a roadblock you created to undermine your goal. Roadblocks are driven by fear and the unknown. We know we want to get fitter, but we're also scared of what that means and the changes it will bring. Number 10, avoidance. Avoiding situations that cause you to feel uncomfortable, not going beyond your comfort zone. Avoiding having hard conversations that you know need to be had. To me, avoidance is like putting your head under the sand. Avoiding is ignoring, but it doesn't mean that the tough things in your life are magically going to disappear. Number 11, risky or disruptive behaviours. These are engaging in patterns of behaviour that hinder progress or your interpersonal relationships, such as excessive drinking, drug use, overeating, driving way over the speed limit, promiscuity, or engaging in toxic relationships. Number 12, procrastination. Delaying or avoiding tasks that are important or necessary for personal growth or success. You leave things to the last minute which cause you to stress out. You can't be bothered doing the housework or organising that necessary medical examination. This could be seen as laziness, but for the procrastinator, putting off things, whether they're essential or not, can be deeply rooted to shame and an underlying drive to self-sabotage as a result. Number 13, punishing yourself. Punishment comes in many forms. For you, it may be food, alcohol, over-exercising, self-harming like cutting, not going to bed at a reasonable time, etc., etc. It might involve an extreme promise to yourself that you can only get X, Y, Z if you do A, B, C. But then you set yourself up so there's no way that you can achieve either. Punishing ourselves also presents in the thoughts we focus our attention on, which leads us to number 14, negative self-talk. Negative self-talk is constantly engaging in self-critical or self-defeating thoughts, putting oneself down or doubting your abilities. Speaking to yourself like you are less than nothing. It could be as simple as that one insidious little sentence that rambles along in your mind that is quick to engage at any sign of anything going right or wrong. I'm useless. I never do anything right. I think we all have a couple of these sentences standing at the ready, watching and waiting to pounce. Can you think what your go-to negative self-talk sentences or words are? Number 15, perfectionism. Setting excessively high standards for oneself, often resulting in feeling overwhelmed, having a fear of making a mistake, or never feeling satisfied with your efforts. Your great is never good enough. Perfectionism is a very judgmental type of self-sabotage. It's mean-spirited. It creates this idea that your self-worth is totally dependent on your achievements. The perfectionistic drive can drive wedges between you and your work colleagues. It can destroy relationships and keep you in this constant area of striving to prove your worth or that you're being better than others. It's the self-sabotage technique that isolates you from other people. Number 16, control. Trying to control others. Maybe you've been in a job where you've been micromanaged, or maybe you are guilty of doing the micromanaging yourself. Recognize that this is a form of self-sabotaging behavior. It is steeped in a belief system of fear and unworthiness. You're letting your ego dictate your life and usually the lives of others. This is another self-sabotaging technique where you are quick to judge, Maybe try to manipulate people to bend to your will, and it's pretty rigid. There is no room for growth or letting go when you are trying to remain in full control, even in the circumstances where you have no control at all. Again, it's important to note that self-sabotage can manifest differently for each person, and these signs are not exhaustive. If you resonate with any of these signs and feel like self-sabotage may be holding you back, consider seeking support from a therapist or a coach who can help you navigate and overcome these patterns. You can choose to break the silence you subject yourself to by learning what your self-sabotaging patterns are and determining to choose to not to use them. Thank you for joining me today. I know we jam-packed a lot into this episode. I encourage you to come back to it. Take some time to identify the ways self-sabotage shows up in your life. Do you recognize any of the whys you self-sabotage? What ways are you perhaps self-sabotaging your relationship, your health goals, your workplace successes? Let me know by joining the conversation on my Facebook page, Reverse Reset Restore. You'll find the link below for both the Facebook and the Instagram pages. In part 2 of The Silence of Self-Sabotage, we'll go through some of the techniques you can incorporate into your life to stop self-sabotaging and silencing yourself. That'll be coming up in just a few days, as I want to give you a chance to think about your self-sabotaging techniques and the reasons why you silence yourself by applying them. We finish off today's episode with a quote from Gary John Bishop, New York Times best-selling author, and it is a doozy. If you're going to think about anything this week around your self-sabotage habits, this'll do it. Sabotage isn't apparently committed by an enemy agent, or is it? Maybe the enemy agent is you.